What is up, everybody? Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show on Sherdog.com, and today we are looking ahead to, do you know what? It's actually a very good Bellator 296 card emanating from Paris, France, next Friday, the 12th of the beautiful month of May. And you know what? I think the fact that this Gegard Mousasi Fabian Edwards fight was announced a while out made us kind of forget about it a little bit. It wasn't until I did my top 5 fights for the month a video, and I was like, well, I don't like this fight for how it makes sense in the division, to be honest, but I love the fight as a fight itself. But what comes underneath it is actually like really, really good. There's some fantastic fights underneath it, and we're going to I suppose brink into all of them here and talk all about them at the start. But I want to concentrate on that main event first, and I suppose the 185 pound division, because as I said, Mousasi versus Edwards in the main event, but also Douglas Lima versus Costello Van Steenis. And I think they're two big fights for this division, because we've Johnny Eblen there at the moment atop the division. He had beaten obviously Gegard Mousasi and won his fight. Since that, if Fabian Edwards wins this, I have it on good authority that he's going to be getting the next title shot. I think that'll probably be in my home country of Ireland, but that can all change with a loss. That can also all change with an injury. It can all change with everything. So it's there's a lot to be done before that can happen. But I think that's what will happen if Fabian Edwards is able to get through Gegard Mousasi. So a lot of things that Bellator want from a card, they have in this one. They have a big important fight at the top. They don't have the title on the line, but it's a big important fight to get to a title from Mousasi, to get back to it as well. And they have a couple of other fights that are not too far away from it either. So to get into the Mousasi and Edwards fight, I suppose it's interesting because both of these guys are at such differing points in their career. 37 years of age now, Gegard Mousasi. Obviously, he was on a great run since he came into Bellator. You know, he only lost to who was it, Rafael Lovato Jr. Before his last fight against Johnny Eblen. He'd taken out basically the whole division there. Douglas Lima, as I mentioned a second ago, John Saul, Austin Vanderfort, Leota Machida. You know, he'd beaten Rory after Rory came up, and even going back further, Rafael Carvalho and Shlemenko and all of that. And he was on a good run when he came over from the UFC as well. He'd beaten Chris Weidman, Uriah Hall, Vitor Belfort, Thiago Santos, Thales Letes, all the way back to 2016. So he's only lost 2 fights since 2016, which is mad. And he's fought a lot, and nearly all of them out there. He's been in there, but now he's been out for a while, and it's been just 11 months-ish, just short of 11 months since he's been in there after that, pretty devastating loss to Johnny Eblen, who he was basically beaten down for 4.5 of those 5 rounds, if not even a little bit more than that. And it's a big fight for Mousasi at this stage of his career. It's a massive fight for him, because you look at the stage of the career Fabian Edwards in, it's very different. He's 30 years of age, but he's a young enough 30 years of age. He's only lost 2 fights in his career as well, to the aforementioned Austin Vanderfort and Costello Van Steenis, who will be seen here. But, he's 2 wins in a row, and I think if he gets a third, he'll be thereabouts for title, as I mentioned. But just first of all, on Mousasi, I'm very interested to see, and I always look at a guy like Mousasi like this, when you get to a point in your career where you lost kind of the big one, and you've done it all in the sport. It's like, what's the point in doing a little bit more? No, not necessarily losing to Eblen is the thing that would make me say, Mousasi should retire, and I'm absolutely not saying that. But for him himself, it's kind of a point in, I think, other sports where people kind of would step away and would retire. But also, we're at the stage where one result can change all of that. Because I think if he loses here to Fabian Edwards, I think it will be retirement, and I think a lot of people will start to talk about retirement. I don't know whether he will or not, but I think people will, right? And a win, well, we're talking about him. Well, Eblen has kind of fought a lot of guys. Could he get another shot at him? So it's a very weird, and I say this with this fight, it's kind of a precipice of going backwards, going out, or going right to the very top, and it's a lot of jeopardy in a fight, and it makes it very, very interesting for me. I want, as I said again, that 11 months out, I wonder how that's going to fare, because he's not the type of guy who has had long periods out. Like, between his last two fights, it was 4 months, between that 6 months, before that again, there was a bit of time due to the pandemic. There was 9 months, I think, before that, but he's usually a guy who fights fairly often, fought a few times in 2019, fought 2 times in 2018, fought 3 times in 2017, and the same in 2006, 5 times in 2016, I think, in fact. He's a guy who fights an awful lot, and to be out for 11 months at this stage of your career, and I said that a few times recently, I feel like it's kind of a reoccurring theme that guys later in their career in MMA do take more time and maybe to come back, and I just wonder how well that will work, especially when you're coming in against a guy here like Fabian Edwards, who's an absolute monster. And just before we get to the fight itself, I suppose, I've mentioned Fabian is one of his last 2 fights in a row. Obviously, he took out a legend in Lyoto Machida, and in the Charlie Ward fight, it was a weird fight, which he kind of dominated, but didn't really massively impress in. He's impressed a lot more in fights previously, but it felt like after that Machida fight, if something had kind of turned for him a little bit, and that maybe that would have been the time to kind of put him in there, and then they did the Charlie fight, which is kind of been a back and forth for a while, and now the Mousasi fight. Like, the reason I think with this Mousasi fight that it doesn't really make a lot of sense is for the reason that if Mousasi wins, he could be fighting for the title again, and Fabian is one of their guys who, if he comes, let's say he comes to Ireland, people will come and watch Fabian. If they go and they put on the card in the UK or whatever, people come and watch Fabian, and he's been that way for a long time. He was a guy, I think he was 11-0 or something as an amateur, and I remember talking about him over in Severe May as an amateur on the way up, and he was always known. He's always a guy who's kind of a fan favourite, and he's one of the kind of the few guys, I think, in the UK that, they have a lot of guys in Ireland, but that Bellator have in the UK that can actually be a star from. And I think it helps the fact as well that his brother now is reigning over in the UFC, and I think a lot of people probably look at that and go, oh, well, if he can do it, maybe Fabian can do it too. And it would have made the perfect story, but he has to go through Mousasi first. It's a fight I'm massively intrigued to watch, because when Fabian fights, right, he usually comes up against guys who don't want to engage him in what he wants to do. And what he wants to do is jab on the outside, throw hard kicks to the body, and be the technical striker in there, right? Now, we'll talk about Mousasi's wrestling in a second, and I think that's a massive part of this, and it's probably too big of a part to be actually leaving down here. But Mousasi, a lot of the time, likes to be a technical striker in there as well, right? He likes to, and like you look at the Eblin fight, and that's, he's trying to be it and he couldn't be it, right? A lot of his fights, he tries to be it, and he usually does succeed. Look at the Vanderford fight; it was obviously very, very quick, but the Salter fight, I know you're talking about wrestlers here, but when he doesn't wrestle, he does like to fight in a similar sort of fashion to Fabian Edwards. Now, not necessarily, one's a southpaw, one's not, and all of that, but I just want, let's say for a second, and let's go with me here. I don't think it'll necessarily turn into this, but if it does turn into that sort of stand-up technical match, I wonder who's going to win that. And if you'd asked me this question maybe at this time last year, I would have said, geez, that's a very, very tough task for Fabian. Like, Mousasi is very, very good at that. You'll have your chances, you'll need to take your chances, but you're going to have to be at 100% to beat Mousasi. And I would say that's still the case, to be honest. But 11 months out at 37 years of age, is it 100% still the case? Will there be a little bit of a drop? Will there be a little bit of a percentage off that Fabian Edwards can take advantage of and win the fight because of it? That's a big question coming in here. I think it's a massive, massive, massive question coming in here. And if Fabian can do that, Fabian's biggest flaw, and I've said this many times, is he doesn't know how good he is. I honestly and truly believe that. He does not know how good he is. Fabian Edwards is a guy who should be going out, and I'm not saying to open up and get hit all the time, right? But he should be going out and destroying very good guys, right? And he hasn't recently. He did against Machida, absolutely, but he hasn't really been doing it. And I feel like I don't know if it's paralysis by analysis or just trying to be the best fighter you can be, which I will never criticize a fighter for, and trying to be as technical as possible. But in MMA, and this, this is maybe a philosophical debate and not one for a preview show, but MMA is not a sport where you can control everything, right? And sometimes you have to okay that in your mind. And you have to realize, well, look, to be successful at the very, very top level, I'm going to have to take chances. I'm going to have to do a little bit extra to finish this guy, to dominate this fight. And I feel like Fabian Edwards hasn't always done that. Like the Vanderford fight, like, I actually think he won that Vanderford fight, to be honest. No, a lot of people don't, but if you look at it in a very judging criteria heavy way, I think it was a very close fight. But let's say he didn't, right? Forget about my opinion here for a second. That's a fight where, with an extra bit of pig-headedness, maybe, you win it, right? You stop you up the pace. This slow, technical pace is great, but you have to stop that pace. You have to up that pace to beat guys like that, and especially against a guy like Mousasi. I think you have to do it. I really think you do. Now, at the other side of that, and let's talk about the wrestling, if you do that too much, you're going to get taken down by Mousasi. A very underrated wrestler. I've always said about him and Glover Teixeira, to me, are the two most underrated wrestlers in the history of MMA. Now, we have some great wrestlers, down through the years, like Cejudo, and, all the way back to Mark Coleman and all the lads, and Cormier and John Jones and Habib Nurmagomedov and everyone we've ever seen, right? We've great wrestlers. But none of them are underrated wrestlers, you get me? In terms of guys who are seen kind of as strikers but can wrestle very well as well, those are two lads that always stick out to me. And if you're Fabian Edwards and you overthrow or overcommit, you're going to get taken down by Mousasi. So all I said there is all well and good. It's easy for me to say, sitting here in my chair in West Limerick, you need to commit more, you need to throw harder, you need to go more. You're in there. That's grand for a lot of other fights as well. And I think it's true for most fights, but it's definitely true for other fights. For the Mousasi fight, I think it still holds true, but you have to be very, very, very careful. You can't allow him the ability to take you down for free. You can't do it, because if he takes you down, it's going to be issues. It really, really is going to be issues. He's won a good few fights by submission in his career. He's won 13 fights by submission or something like that. Now he's had a lot of fights, but he could fight on the ground. He could finish you on the ground, and you have to be very, very careful. Now, Fabian Edwards is not mug on the ground either. He's won a few fights by armbar from the bottom and stuff, and he has an active guard. A thing, again, which I think he should be more confident in. But I just think Fabian as well, 30 years of age, he needs to start doing it now, right? This is Fabian's time. It's all well and good saying he has all the quality, he has all the ability. He just needs to kind of take it to that next level. Well, now this is the next level. We're here. We're at the next level. We're at the time now where Fabian Edwards needs to do it, right? And I know my guy John Brannigan is going to put up preview and predictions here, so I better give my prediction. But I honestly find it so hard to predict this fight. I really do. I'm not sure 100% how Gegard is going to look, and I'm not sure if Fabian is going to up that level that he needs to win this fight, right? I'm not sure. I think I'm picking Mousasi. It could be a pick where I'm looking at after and is like, why didn't I listen to myself and say he was out for that long and he's 37 years of age fighting the young up and comer? But I just think that wrestling could be the difference. I think the fact he's a very good striker and as good or a better of a striker at this stage of his career anyway, possibly, than Fabian has ever faced. And I think if that is the case, he will win. And it's a toss of a coin, though. It's a toss of a coin. I don't like doing predictions, to be honest. I really don't. I'd rather just break it down like I just did and say, look, my prediction is whoever wins will win. It's sort of thing. But I'm going for Gegard. Do you know what? I better write that down, because like I'll come to the end of the video and I'll be like, hear me recapping my predictions. Who do I predict? I forget. The other middleweight fight, though, is a vastly interesting one as well. You have Douglas Lima against Costello van Steenis. Now, Douglas Lima, is coming off of 4 losses in a row. Obviously, 3 of them at welterweight and 1 against Mousasi up at middleweight. Jason Jackson, MVP, Amasov and Mousasi, all by decision. He beat Rory McDonald before that. Costello Van Steenis on the other side of it, he's coming off of a win in against Kamil Onishuk when it was about 6-7 months ago. And before that, he was out for 2 years. And who had he beaten before that? Fabian Edwards. And I think it's very weird. Like the fact that he did fight, 6-7 months ago, he beat Fabian Edwards in the fight before that, and he's ranked like number 10 in the Bellator rankings or something, and Fabian Edwards is ranked number 2. Like, I don't know how that works, but anyway. And not to give out about rankings, because I hate giving out about rankings, but just to say, like, if you're looking at Costello Van Steenis, you're thinking, oh, he's number 10 in the world or whatever. Like, that he's not a number 10 in the world. He's not. I think it's a tough fight for him, though. It's a very interesting fight because, like, you look at it, I do think this is going to be a stand-up fight. I think Lima will try to do what he always does. He'll try to kick the outside of the leg. He'll try to fight at a slower pace. He'll try to outpoint him, and it hasn't worked for him in his last 4 fights. Like Lima again is another guy kind of like Fabian, except maybe worse because it's in the later part of his career and he's shown everything they can do. He just needs to let it go a little bit more. You know, and as I said again, easy for me to say sitting here, but he needs to let it go. Costello is a guy who does let it go, right? He comes forward, he lands a lot of shots, he's well rounded, he can wrestle, he can strike. Let me just see the difference in size here, because if it is, he's 6'1" and Douglas Lima, well, the biggest difference in size, 6'1" as well, yeah. Douglas Lima though is kind of a longer guy, I suppose, for down in welterweight. I think Costello Van Steenis will have the size advantage here. They're both weighing in at 185. I think, you know, Lima will probably be close to 195. I think Costello will probably be closer to 205 by the time they fight. Forget me. Now, that's pure speculation from me, but having seen him fight before, I think that will be the case. I think he will be the bigger man in there. And I wonder if that will play a factor here. I wonder if he can just put a bit of forward motion on him. Lima is very good at circling away and being defensively good. But if Van Steenis, and you know he's a good athlete as well, Van Steenis, if he can push him back and push him against the cage and maybe land a few shots against the cage, for a guy like Lima who doesn't have the biggest output in the world, those few shots against the cage could win him a fight. Him holding him against the cage and landing a few knees and landing maybe an elbow or two could win Costello Van Steenis the fight. I'm picking Costello Van Steenis to win this fight, and the reason I'm picking him is because I don't trust Lima anymore to go out there and perform. I'll say it again, and that's not against Lima's ability or anything, right? I think he is. I remember Joe Rogan talking about him a few years ago, saying he's one of the best welterweights in the world, and he was. Douglas Lima was a fantastic fighter, and I'm sure still is a fantastic fighter, but he just does not deliver it enough. He just does not deliver enough, and you reach a certain point where he's gone 4 fights in a row and he's not delivering it. To say, like, is he going to deliver it again? Now, you look at the last 4 guys, and I do think Costello Van Steenis is a little bit of a come down in quality. Not to say that he's not good, because I think he is very good, but like this sort of opponent should be a good matchup for a really good technical hard striker like Lima, even though it's up a weight, you know. But I'm picking him almost because he's trying to be. I'm picking Costello because Lima's almost trying to be too technical. If you get me, right? And that's a really bad position to be in if you're Lima. What makes you great is actually holding you back. And I would love if he came out and performed, because I think it'd be a very close fight. I would love if Fabian came out and performed the way I know he can as well, because these lads, it's in them. It really is in them. They're quality. And I hope I'm not coming off negative about them now here or anything, because I do not mean that in the slightest. I'm a big fan of both of these guys. But they just need to unleash their inner beast and come out and fight these fights. And if they do, we'll have 2 absolute gobsmackers at the top of this card. No, the Steenis Lima fight isn't necessarily at the top of the card. There's 2 fights above it. First of all, just quickly, I'll touch on Thibault Gouti against Kane Mousah. Obviously, Gouti fighting out of France, so Bellator smart to put him up there towards the top. He's some good wins over the last while. He did lose to Alfie Davis last time out. He was in the UFC for a while. Had a 1 win there, but lost. A good few of his fights. Remember, famously lost to Sage Northcutt, Nazar Hakparas as well. But, he had a bit of time away from MMA there for around 3 years after that. He made his comeback, fought a couple of times on the local scene over the next, 2 years or so, and then came into Bellator, beat Lewis Long, and as I said, lost to Alfie Davis. Whereas Kane Mousah, honestly, I think Kane Mousah has gone to a level that I didn't believe he could get to, if I'm being honest. Look, he's won these last 2 as well, but that one was Georgi Karchanyan, and he looked phenomenal in that. Even the Davy Gallon fight before that, it was a close enough fight. He beat Alessandro Botti before that as well, and he's won another few fights in Bellator also. But I wouldn't look at Kane Mousah's record too much. I would look more at that performance against Karchanyan, and I think he'll win this fight. I think he'll beat Thibault Gouti, and I think he'll go on maybe to fight Peter Queally. They were supposed to fight at the start of last year. Maybe that fight could be reprised. I know there was a bit of back and forth between them as well on the night that they were supposed to fight. So, yeah, I think that is an interesting fight. I do favour Mousah, although maybe it's kind of set up for Gouti in his own country. But I like that fight. I think it'll be a bit of a banger. In the co-main event, though, we have a fight from the 155-pound tournament, which is great because before they weren't allowed to put these on overseas. Now they are, so I'm hoping we'll get one now in Ireland coming up here in September or whenever they're coming back. And the fight is between Brent Primus and Mansour Barnaoui, whose name I always pronounce perfectly. Primus hasn't had the best time over the last while, I suppose. Lost 2 of his last 3, beating Benson Henderson in the middle of that. Lost Alexander Shibley and Islam Mamedov, who are 2 very good fighters. One of them obviously a split decision, but he'd been fighting a bit on kind of the European scene for a while. He fought Bungard, he fought Tim Wilde and beat both of them, and now he's back to fight against Barnaoui. This is a very different task to all of them. If you don't know Mansour Barnaoui, you should probably get to know him. This guy is an absolute beast. He hasn't lost a fight since 2016. He beat Adam Piccolotti last time out, decimated him, and he'd been out of the cage for 3 years before that. Like, his only losses in his career are to Matthias Gamrot, one of the best fighters in the world at the time in KSW, Ivan Bushinger, who, went on, I think, a 10-fight winning streak after McGregor beat him, Islam Makhachev, and Kevin Lee as well, who's obviously a very good fighter, and that was back in 2012, so it's 11 years ago. But he's another one of these guys who needs to do it now as well. He's only 30 years of age still, but he looked damn good in his last fight. He went on a great run over on the road, fighting a lot of lads with a lot of experience over there, and he's just so well rounded. His ground game is brilliant. I hope this turns into a jiu-jitsu matchup, because Brent Primus is a lad who is always a bit mad. He'll always jump in there and try to get you to the ground and submit you on the way down, or get a go-go platter or a leg lock or something. And Barnaoui is, I think, a lot more kind of languid maybe in his approach than Primus, who's maybe a little bit agricultural, but I mean that as a compliment. It can be very good, and I like Primus the way he fights. But this is a real clash of styles on the ground, I think, and I'm mad up to see that. I think this will be a fantastic fight. On the feet, I'm interested to see how it goes, because Primus he throws those big boulders. Barnaoui maybe a little bit more succinct in what he does as well, throwing out a few jabs and stuff. But I do think Barnaoui will want to get the fight to the ground. I think Primus will have no problem fighting on the ground as well, and I do think it'll end up there, which isn't always the case in fights like this, but it should be fun. After that, then there's a few fights that stand out. Saul Rogers against Davy Gallon, who I mentioned a few minutes ago. Not being the most amazing runs for both of these guys. Saul obviously lost to Tim Wilde in what I think was a bit of a bit of a surprise, I think, to a lot of people. Entered as a -400 favourite and ended up losing. He'd beaten Georgi Kharkhanyan before that, after losing, to Mads Burnell in the fight, which could have got him right up the ranks. This is a big fight, I think, for Saul Rogers, because I think everyone on the UK scene knows how talented Saul is, but it's been a lot of setbacks and stuff like that. Davy Galan, on the other hand, then he was on a great run before he lost to Daniel Skitizi last time out. I think he'd won 5 in a row before that. Everyone remembers that rolling thunder kick against Ross Pearson, and he'd won a couple of fights, beat Charlie Leary, beat the aforementioned Kane Mousah as well. So that's a tough high level fight. On the last fight, I'm picking Barnaoui. I don't know. I'm going to go with Davy Galan in this one, even though I think it's a toss up, really. Jose Augusto against Simon Biyong. Then, if you don't know Biyong, another guy, I think he's training over in France. He actually trained in the UFD gym, which is a brilliant gym. Solid and all of them over in Germany. Got a couple of great wins last time out. Luke Traynor, he beat him, and we've seen what Luke Traynor has done since. Looked phenomenal in his fight against Sullivan Colley, and he won that fight. Won a fight since, and now he's coming in here like, if he wins at light heavyweight, goes on a 4-5 win streak here, he's got to be right up there, and I think Biyong is a guy who a lot of people have talked about, who a lot of people have said, this could be a guy in that division. I think if he wins here, he's gone up even further, and he will be doing well. A very interesting fight between Tim Wilde and Chris Gonzalez at 155. Kyle Stewart is fighting Gregory Babene. I like Biyong in that fight. I like Babene, and do you know what? I think Chris Gonzalez will beat Tim Wilde, but as I just said, Tim Wilde he'd probably be an underdog coming into this, but he he often wins as an underdog. It's very interesting. A couple of fights from the undercard as well. Denise Kielholtz was in one of the fights of the year. She's fighting Paula Cristina. I think she will win that fight, but her record 6-5, not the best record in the world. She needs to get a couple of wins there to get back up, I suppose, at 125. That division now is going to be wide open. It could be even more wide open, if this Lima fight happens against Liz Carmouche. So I suppose we'll see how that will go. I do like Kielholtz there, though, in that one. Oliver Inkamp against Luca Pilat. That's a pretty high level fight as well. Like Luca's probably a bit of an underrated fighter coming out of SBG. He got that Lucanator choke last time out, if people remember. And I know a lot of lads in SBG kind of mentioned him, like, this is a guy kind of flying under the radar. It was his first fight in Bellator, and now they're putting in there against Inkamp, who has been around for a long time and has always shown up and always fought well. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights, only losing to Kyle Crutchmere, and all of them were finishes. Those 4 wins. So big fight here. I think both lads as well will be happy to fight this fight out in the ground. I think they're both similar enough. I think Pilat is one of these guys that bites his time very well and is calm in there. Whereas I think Inkamp tries to make things happen a little bit more. Who's going to win that battle? Not very sure. You know what? I'll go with a bit of Irish bias here, and I'll pick Luca Pilat to get the submission, but I think it will be a fun one on the ground. Stephen Hill is fighting Nicolo Saioli as well, coming out of SPG, if I'm not mistaken. Indeed he is. He won his last fight against Boubacar Kamara. Before that, he lost to the current Cage Warriors lightweight champion, George Hardwick. But that was back in 2020. He's only had one fight he had a no contest against Bobby Pallard as well. But Stephen Hill, 7-0, bringing the undefeated record in here. Guys who've never lost, it's very hard for them to lose. He got a good win last time out over Joel Kouja. This is going to be his 3rd fight at Bellator, and he's a guy who goes in there and he finishes a lot of his fights. I think only one of his fights so far out of the 7 has gone to a decision. So tough fight for Saioli. I think it is a bit of a step up for Hill. Is he going to be able for it? I suppose let's see. I think it's a toss of a kind. I go for Hill on that one. There's a lot of SBG fighters on this card, actually, funny enough. Asela Juge is the one though. Like I've spoken to a few lads about spoke to Peter Quealy on this very show, and I asked him who is the one guy in the gym that you think is going to reach that next level, and he told me Juge. And I was talking to someone else about him, and they were saying to me, there's a lot of money and a lot of opportunities floating around in Irish MMA and SBG, especially at the moment, and a lot of lads maybe, we have it made now, and Juge is not one of them. He's one of these lads. I think he won his fight against Jordan Barton. And at 8 o'clock the next morning, his father came in and got him out to run 10K. That's what you're getting from Juge. And he's shown those improvements. I think the best fight I've ever seen between two debuting pros was him and Konstantin Blanita back at Bellator 240, and it's a pity we haven't seen much of Blanita since then. I'd love to see him back, but he's won all five fights since. He's fighting George Sasu here. I know George was supposed to get a few opportunities on a few cards. He's only, and a lot of them kind of fell out. He was supposed to fight Kieran Clark, wasn't he? Yeah. He did end up fighting Elias Bully. I'd lost that, but that was in 2021. He fight before that 2018, so he hasn't been in there much. I do favour Juge to win that one. Flying massively under the radar here as well is Brett Johns. Brett Johns came into Bellator and everyone was thinking like he could be fighting for a title pretty soon, and he's going to be right up there. And he's been buried on a lot of these undercards. He was supposed to fight James Gallagher, to be fair, and that would have been a big fight. And then he fought Jordan Winsky. I was at that fight in Dublin. One of those fights that was buried in the middle of all the Irish fighters. And like, even, I'll take some of the responsibility for like even us covering it. We weren't concentrating on that fight, we weren't. And that's a fact of the matter. But look, he has a big opportunity here to win a fight, put 3 in a row, and maybe get on that Dublin card towards the end of the year. Maybe get Gallagher, They both seem to want that fight. But, he's had a good run. He lost to Danny Sabatello when he came in, of course. But, his opponent, I don't know too much about him, if I'm being honest. 11-3 coming out of Brazil. This is his debut in Bellator. He's beaten some guys with some good records. His last 2 opponents, 10-2, 13-2 as well. A lot of finishes, a lot of knockouts in his record. I think all his finishes are, he won submission, but the rest of them are knockouts. So, I'm sure it'll be an interesting test for Brett Johns, but one he needs to win, and I'll pick him to win that there. Aside from that, I love the fight. The last fight I'm going to talk about here is actually, there's an interesting fight. Sarvajan Kamidov, 14-0 against Kevin Petchy. Always interesting. Like, that stood out to me here looking at that record, and watching a couple of these fights. This is another guy who is a dangerous enough guy. He won his debut in a minute with a liver kick, and I kind of marked him on as, okay, this is a guy to watch. He won a few fights over in UAE Warriors against a couple of guys who have been fighting for a long time, and he was before that. His first few fights in his career, fighting 1-1, 0-0, 1-0, 1-0, 0-1, 0-2, 1-0. Whenever you see that on a record, you're kind of like, oh. But then he's been beating very good guys since that, and he's definitely one to keep an eye on here. And I think he'll win that fight against Petchy. But the Yves Landau, Piotr Niedzielski fight, that's a very, very good high level fight. I suppose we all know. His nickname is, Yves Landau for that flying knee knockout against Terry Brazier. Jesus, 2 years ago now at this stage, but lost to Tim Wilde, as I mentioned before that. Tim Wilde has some good wins in there, but 1-2 fights since, knocked out Gavin Hughes, but Niedzielski, a dangerous guy. Okay, he lost last time out to Richie Smullen. What a performance that was by Richie, who's fighting in the next card here coming up as well. But he beat Pedro Carvalho in his debut before that, and he'll be looking to bounce back here in a big way coming into this card. So I'm going to pick Niedzielski in that one. I think he's resting, might see him through, but it feels like all the Niedzielski fights are going to be close fights. And if you're Yves Landau, I think you want to probably change that with a big flying knee or something like that. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go with Niedzielski in that one. So, that's it, lads. I think I've given my picks throughout it. Look, just to quickly recap the main picks, I'm going to go for Mousasi. I'm going to go for Barnaoui. I'm going to go for Mousah, and at a push, I'm going to go for Costello van Steenis as well on the main card. But you know what? This is a creeping up on me kind of good card, to be honest. And I'm bang up for it. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And let's see how it goes next Friday night. Plus, it's at a good time for me. I don't have to stay up all night to watch it, so that's always a bonus, as you know. All right, everyone. I really appreciate you tuning in to listen to this. If you haven't seen all the other shows that we have up on Sherdog, please check them out. And if you would, click the subscribe button, click the like button, leave a comment below. It really helps us out, and I'd be very grateful if you would do that. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.